Well, welcome to Relationship Rules Part 3. This is the third and final part of this. If you've missed any of the previous parts, you can get caught up on our YouTube channel. I'm going to share something that my wife does not like that I do. In honor of Mother's Day, we'll just start it off this way. When I type, I'm not a subtle typer. I'm a loud typer, and the more engaged I am with what I'm typing about, the louder I get. So I'll be in bed, I'll be working on a message or writing an email, and I'll be like a little bit impassionate, a little bit fired up about it, and I'm just like, and it sounds probably like more like a typewriter actually than a keyboard. And my wife will say, "Can you stop that?" And I say, "I'll go to a different room." Sorry about that. I don't know what it is though about the fact that there's a keyboard in front of me. Seems like I type things differently than I would say them. You ever experienced this? You're writing an email and all of a sudden you're like, wouldn't say that, but I'm glad I typed it. Like you sound a little bit differently on a screen than you do face to face, don't you? There's this thing called, a buddy of mine, Clay Scroggins, he calls this keyboard courage. This is where you decide that you are going to say whatever you feel like through a screen because it's through a screen, not a person, right? So keyboard courage, when we talk about this morning, is this actually what's best? Get this, there we go. Is this what's best for our relationships? Keyboard courage? You're like, wait, that's not a real relationship. I've never met them. I never will meet them. This is all on social media. It stays on social media. It doesn't impact me. I mean, it does a little bit during the time, but like it's not a real relationship, and I would beg to differ with you on that point. But it's not just people that we don't know. We text differently than we talk. We email differently than we talk. I don't know about letters, like if you longhand write a letter. Maybe that was a thing, but probably not, because it takes so long to actually process to write. You're like, oh, I probably shouldn't say that. But technology changes, right? Technology has changed everything. The way that we communicate, the way that all this has changed in our lifetime. Every single person in here can say honestly that technology has changed exponentially in the time that we've been alive. It's wild how fast this has changed. We've entered a new technological era. And the problem is the standards of behavior and etiquette have not been set yet. It's like it's changing so quickly, there's not like a standardized idea of what is okay, what's not okay online or on our screens or on our phones or whatever it might be. And these are real relationships that get affected by it. The way that you talk to someone on a phone is still talking to them. And our relationships are affected by this. Real relationships get fractured by real comments that you made on a screen. You know, screens are very real. They have real results. Within businesses, like you can lose your job because of what you type or write on a screen. Or a business can actually go bankrupt because of what they wrote on a screen or someone wrote on a screen. You know, students and kids, they get bullied all the time on screens. That's a real part of life that we have to deal with now. And that's not even like getting into the scams and the catfish, mantateo, anyone. There's all kinds of stuff that happen on there. So this morning, I'm thinking I might just talk about technology and the evils of it. I'm not actually. A little bit, maybe. But our society, they treat screens differently. We treat screens differently than people. And I'm not sure why there's the disconnect. I have some ideas that we're going to talk about, but that is an adverse. It is a bad aspect in our relationships. So we're going to take some time and talk about that. You know, one of the areas that I like to hang out at is online. Is in the comment section. Anybody else? It's my favorite. I don't ever type anything. I don't write anything. I just read a lot. Because this is a space where people decide to show their true, actual feelings, what they think, their perspective. And I read it and I think, how is that actually how you see the world? Look at how crazy this person is. And they go on. Or there's other people in the comment section and their whole goal is just to be funny. Like, just to poke the bear as much as they can, just get people upset. And when you know that that's what they're doing, then it's hilarious. If they don't know that it's happening to them, though, then it's even more hilarious. The worst, so I hang out on comment sections, so beware. The worst part is though, if you click on someone's profile after reading their comment, you're like, whoa, they're going hard today. And you click on their profile and then you see that it says Christian. And you're like, it's like the biggest gut punch. Like you're laughing like, haha, you're nuts. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is the problem, right? This is the problem. This is why the church, this is why Christians have a bad public image. Because we have bad marketing by us. Like we've done a really good job to show what it's not like to be like Jesus. Like we do this and it's not just in our face-to-face. We can be super kind face-to-face. The moment we get online, it's like we put on a whole other persona. We type loudly maybe, like I do, but I don't make comments, right? But we type loudly and we make comments about other people, and that is a poor reflection of what it is to follow Jesus, and yet we do that. So like I said, today I'm just going to rant about technology, the evils of it, social media, how horrible it is. No, I'm not going to do that. But technology is like a rock. I mean, this is the reality. Technology is just a tool. It's like a rock. You can build things with it, or you could throw it through a window. And the rock has done nothing to change. It's like it just is. It's amoral. It's a rock. That's what technology is. It's amoral. It doesn't have a moral code or compass on itself. It just allows us to do what we want with it. So I watched a show on Netflix, and it's a dangerous show. It's called The Social Dilemma, the documentary. And I learned a few things, and it's terrifying. Really, this is what it is. It's terrifying. These are some quotes. I'm just going to read you some of the quotes that stuck out to me through this. The first one: nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse. Now, just to give you a heads up on The Social Dilemma, this is a documentary with people that have been in very extremely high positions in social media organizations, in online organizations like Google and Twitter and Facebook. And these people are looking at what it started as, what it is, and the direction that it's headed. It's like this big, massive warning to all of us. Hey, we're moving in this direction. Do you think this is a good direction? This is what they said. Nothing vast enters life of mortals without a curse. There's something attached to this thing. Next quote: if you don't pay for the product, you are the product. Think about that for a second. You're like, I've got all of these free, like online social media accounts. You're like, they're free. It's great. It's actually not. You're actually the product. They're making money off of you. You're just a means to an end. Another quote: the technology that connects us also controls us. That's scary. The last one: social media is a drug. This is someone that said this that is was at an extremely high level in these organizations. Social media is a drug. And we've actually seen the evidence of this. That your brain gets a dopamine hit from social media. The likes, the clicks, all of those things affect you on a chemical level. And you can get addicted to it just like other drugs. And it's terrifying because the entire goal of these people is to keep you online, on the app, on the screen as long as possible. And there's people way smarter than I am that have figured out how to get my attention. And that's how they profit. That is their end goal. And they're doing a really, really good job of it. So if you're a parent, I highly suggest checking this documentary out, The Social Dilemma. I'm going to warn you, it's scary to think about. It's scary to look at it in the face. But as a parent, shouldn't we be looking at dangerous things in the face if our children are going to be around it, or if they currently are engaging with it? We should know about it. So in this big, broad idea and this thought, and how can we use technology for good? Technology is a thing. We can't get away from it. It's not like it's just going to disappear in a moment. So how do we use it for good? If it's just a tool that's amoral and we've seen the evils of it. How do we use it for good? I mean, initially, that's how it was created. Social media, though, the end goal of social media was to connect people in community that were far apart, physically, they could be connected together online. But that's not what it's turned into, is it? Because it's now all about judgment, and it's about envy, and you hop on there even with your friends, if you were honest, you don't say this, but if you were honest, you'd be like, I wish my life was more like theirs. That's your judgment. That's your thought. Like, I wish I was more like that. I can't. You're just looking at the height, like at the peaks, right? But this is what social media does. Now, I know that there's a wide spectrum of folks in here this morning as far as faith goes, as far as your experience with social media goes, as far a number of different things. You're going to be in a very different place in life. Everybody in here represents a different spot, and that's okay. That's great, actually. But regardless of faith, this is a conversation that actually is going to be beneficial and helpful for all of our relationships. And I get it. You're also probably thinking, hold on. Jesus, he didn't say anything about social media. He didn't say anything about that. He didn't I don't remember all of the miracles, but I'm pretty sure he didn't bring a dead battery back to life or heal a cracked screen. He didn't do that. So how are we going to tie these two together? Well, because Jesus actually talks to us about our language. Right? If you're a Jesus follower, this is how we live in this world today, in our society today, with technology as a part of it, in this direction. That's the conversation we're going to have. It's interesting. We talk about following Jesus, and when we look in nature, I had this moment the other day. I was sitting out with some friends. We're outside and just enjoying being outside again. And there's sunshine, and the birds are chirping, and we can hear some frogs, and there's water. The whole thing is just beautiful. And I thought, this is awesome. Because when I look at that, it's easy for me to be redirected and pointed back to God, the creator of what I'm looking at, the creator of creation. I'm looking at that going, I am so connected. I'm so reminded of God in this moment. And then I had a second thought that was, it is hard to find Jesus in that tree, though. That tree, the beauty of the tree, doesn't lead me back to my Savior. The thing that does that in this world is people. The reflection of Jesus is best exemplified in us, to those around us. It's not just nature, it's not just creation, it's us as the creation. That's where Jesus is reflected. That's where we actually can communicate God's love to people without actually using words. Now, as a whole, for our relationships, it takes work and effort, doesn't it? It takes a lot of work. And when we follow Jesus the best, we introduce love and grace and mercy and kindness and goodness. All these things into the relationship are reflecting our Savior. Well, that's hard. It's hard to do that all the time. We have bad days. We have bad attitudes. They have issues themselves, right? So that's why we're in this conversation about relationship rules. And I know it's not like rules that's going to fix everything within relationships, but they're like guidelines. It's moving us in the direction of healthy relationships. So just to remind ourselves what the first couple of rules were. Rule number 1, I will treat every person as someone Jesus died for because they are, and he did. This is all about our vision. This is all about how we see someone. When we see them as someone that Jesus died for, it changes how we treat them. And when we change how we treat them, it changes how we feel about them. Right? Rule number 2, I will do all I can do to keep peace with all people. We talked about this last week, and you're like, I don't know if that's possible. And even Paul, when he wrote this verse that we looked at last week, he even said, if it's possible. It might not be possible. We should do everything we possibly can to try to keep peace in our relationships. Like I said, it's hard to make the connection as far as our technology and our faith. It's easy for us to keep those separate drawers, so to speak, in our life. But Jesus did say some pretty big things, connecting our language, the words that we use, how we communicate. And he actually talks about the weight of those words. We're going to look a little bit in this biography of Jesus, basically, called Matthew. in Matthew, who has been around Jesus, spent time with Jesus, and then wrote down his experiences, Matthew writes about this one moment where Jesus has a large crowd around him, and he speaks to this connection between your words and your heart, that they are absolutely connected. He essentially says that your words come from your heart. How we communicate, whether that is typed or spoken, your words are connected to your heart. So just to kind of paint the picture, there's a large crowd. It's kind of the usual suspects. So you got the Pharisees, teachers of the law that are there. They're kind of checking Jesus out, see if they can undermine him somehow. You have people that are just like passing by and see a large crowd, and they're like, I don't know, let's stick around here and get see what's going on here. And then you got some people that try to follow Jesus. Whenever they know he's around, they're going to show up. And then you have like Jesus's followers, his disciples, those guys that are always there. They're kind of in leadership positions. So you have this just swath of society that's showing up to this moment. And the Pharisees, they want to, like I said, they want to undermine Jesus' authority, because when he teaches, when he shows these signs and wonders, even though he's a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi, that should be in line with them, what he's teaching and how he's teaching and the claims that he's making, most importantly, are undermining the authority that they have, the power that they have, the influence that they have on other people. So they wanted this whole thing to go away. And they thought the best way that they could do this is to undermine him, discredit him, do something about that. So there's this moment. They bring forward, this is like a big test for him. They bring forward this man that he's demon-possessed. He's mute, and he's blind. Okay? So he can't see, he can't speak, and he's demon-possessed. And they bring this man in front of Jesus, and in front of the whole crowd, they think that he's going to stumble, do something silly or whatever. He just heals the man. He's like, oh, well, let's just take care of this real quick. He heals the man, casts out the demons. The man can see, the man can speak, and this is all done in their very presence. Like they watch this miracle happen right in front of them. And it's that moment where you think you're trying to set someone up, and then they overcome the setup. And I'm sure the Pharisees in that moment, they're looking at each other like, that backfired. That didn't work out the way that we thought it would. So they try to pivot. They try to stay on their toes in that moment. They're like, I know what we'll say. What we'll say, there's their thoughts. What we'll say is that Jesus is actually demon-possessed himself, because that's how he got rid of the demons. Which is not logical at all anyway. But this thing that Jesus does is he knows your thoughts. So Jesus cuts them off before they even say this and before they make this argument. He starts to speak directly to it. And this is what we're going to look at in Matthew chapter 12, verse 33. Jesus uses this illustration. He says, make a tree good, and its fruit will be good. Or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. You have in this illustration, you have things that are seen, the fruit. You see that. Everybody sees that. In our life, there's fruit, right? And there's things that are hidden, the roots. We can't see the roots. But the roots are what's determining, the roots are where that fruit is coming from, essentially. And then Jesus takes this a step further, and he connects this, what is seen, what is felt, what is heard, with our words. And then he connects the unseen with our heart. He says in verse 34, you brood of vipers, speaking directly to, I don't know if you've said that lately. He's speaking directly to the Pharisees, knowing their thoughts. I don't know if you've called anyone a brood of viper lately, but give it a try. Give it a whirl. Not your mom today, okay? Not today. It says, you brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. It reminds me of this moment in a movie where a guy says, your moral compass is so messed up, I'm surprised you'll even be able to find your way home. This is essentially what Jesus is saying. Like, you're evil. Nothing good actually can come out of that. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Out of the heart comes the words. And he's talking about what they're about to try to say. What they're trying to do to him is evil. He's speaking directly to this. And he's speaking to not just the specific words that are being used, but the type of words, the tone of the words. You ever get in trouble for the tone of your words? You say the right thing but the wrong way, and it's still the dig that you want it to be. This is what Jesus is speaking to. That your words have weight and value. Your words come from someplace. They are experienced by somebody else. The edge that you put on your words, whether orally or whether typed, has an impact and an effect on the other person. It's true in your emails. It's true online. It's true in text. It's true, like I said, I don't know if letters really counts here because I think you process a little bit longer on that. But this is true. Our relationship with words matter because our relationship with people matters. Moving on to verse 35. He says, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up. A lot of good. Out of the good things stored up in him. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. Jesus is saying your heart is like a bucket. It fills up. And you fill it up with good or bad. But at some point, it's going to overflow. Right? There's inputs and there's outputs. And at some point, the things that we've stored up in our hearts, they're going to escape. They're going to come out. And we better be careful. We can't control the outburst. It's like a volcano that's going to erupt. Eventually, it's going to come out. You ever, those moments typically are the over-exaggeration. Like someone over-responds. Have you ever seen this? Of course you have because you're a person. We like to call this the dollar response for a dime incident. Like someone just outdoes the moment. You're like, what are you doing? This isn't even that big of a situation. Why are you going that far in this? There's a story I heard, and it is not about our band, just to be clear. But there was a band, and it was a worship band, and it was for a high school event. And if you're familiar with how bands work today, a lot of them, most of them, use either a computer or an iPad or some type of device to start the song and have everybody stay on track. And the lead worshiper is waiting for the drummer, which is usually where it's at, to start and hit start. Well, for whatever reason, because technology doesn't work perfectly, he's pushing start, but it's not working. So it's like this waiting game. And all of a sudden, the worship leader turns and gives the drummer like this death glare, right? I don't know if you know a lot about drummers. That's someone I will not give a death glare to. For good reason. So the end of the story is, eventually the iPad or the computer starts and they get through the song. They finish the set. They go backstage and the drummer pulls the worship leader over. I'm sure he did. He says, I've got two things for you. Don't you ever look at me that way or it'll be the last time. Those are fighting words. And he's got sticks. Secondly, he goes, you better check underneath your own hood. Because for whatever reason, whatever's brewing in you, whatever's that close to the surface that would make this situation boil over is something that you need to pay attention to. There is some tension inside of you that has gone unchecked for too long. You better check yourself before you wreck it. Like, whatever. You better check yourself out, though. There's something inside. There's something in your heart going on. You need to take care of that. Here's the important part here. Regardless of how the emotions got there, we are responsible for how they come out. Now, victim mentality is something that we fight against. This is something that's not healthy. It's not beneficial. When we see ourselves as the victim constantly over and over again, like it doesn't allow us to grow forward. But there are real situations where you are the victim, where someone has done something to you, said something to you, impacted your life in such a way that you had no control over. And if you told me your story, I'd be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened to you. I would try to use empathy. I would try to probably give you a hug and say, you can do this. Like, I'm so sorry, but there's hope for you still. Here's the problem. Just because that emotion has been lodged in there and you didn't place it in there. You experienced, but you didn't place it there. That emotion, when it comes out, that is your responsibility. Because it's going to boil out, it's going to spill out into your other relationships. Often it's not even the relationship of the person that put it in there to start with. And you're responsible for that. Back to the verses. Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 says, this is Jesus telling us this. But I tell you that everyone will have to give an account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken. I added or typed. Just so we're clear, we don't like this idea, this premise. We don't like the idea of a day of judgment. We're like, come on, can't we just can't I just do my thing, you do your thing, we'll all be good? Can I just do my online stuff over here? For whatever reason, the mindset that we have when it comes to Twitter is it's almost like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens on Twitter stays in Twitter. But I'll tell you what, if something that happens in Vegas gets on Twitter, it does not stay on Twitter or in Vegas. It gets out there. That's the mentality that we have. It's a separate compartment that keeps everything there. But that's not reality. That's not the world that we live in. It gets out. It moves beyond. We can't always control it. And we definitely don't like this idea of a day of judgment. These are Jesus' words, not mine. A day of judgment? That you're going to be held accountable? That's terrifying. We don't like that idea. Especially when it's about us. When we start thinking about other people being judged, we kind of come around to it a little bit. It's like, okay, all right, but he really deserves that. Someone needs to tell him that he's wrong. I've tried so many times, he won't listen. We get excited about other people being judged. When it comes to us, we don't like judgment. Really good example of this, if you're like, no, I just want everybody to do their own thing, and they can stay in their own lane, and I'll stay in mine, and we'll all be good. If you at all have experienced athletics from my son is 6, he plays coach pitch baseball, which is super entertaining right now and very long. But all the way to the Mariners that are playing, this whole spread of athletics from birth to peak performance. Every single person in those games want there to be a good and righteous judge, an official that calls the right calls. That person was out, that person was safe. That was a strike, that was a ball. We want that. We want the right choice, the right decision to be made. Right? Because then it's fair, then it's even, then it's just. We love that justice piece, especially about somebody else. But we want that. We actually want that. We don't like judgment on ourselves, but we love justice when it's acted out upon other people. Back to our verses. Next verse, verse 37. Jesus says, for by your words, he gets more specific too, not just actions, but your words. You're held accountable for your words. By your words, you will be acquitted, and by your words, you will be condemned. Both ways. Your words can lead you in a healthy, good direction, or they can take you somewhere else entirely, and you will be held accountable for everything that you say. There's this author that I'm a big fan of. His name is James Clear. He wrote The Atomic Habits. And this is what he says. Every word I use is a vote for the kind of person I want to become. If you could think about one quote this week, choose this one. Because that will absolutely affect how you speak to other people. If you are defining the person that you are becoming by your very words, you will choose different words than you've been using, I bet. So this leads us to our rule number 3 for today. I will treat you with respect, whether I'm with you or not, whether you're in the room with me or not, whether I ever know what you look like and what your real name is or not. I will treat you with respect. A lot of people on social media love filters because it makes us look better or it's funny or whatever it might be. But what if we used a filter for our words? What if we were able to actually utilize something to allow our words to go through some type of filtration system process where we actually communicated what we wanted to, and the things that we probably shouldn't communicate, it stopped them. It held back the wrong things. I think that's the intent of Matthew chapter 12. I think that's one of the things that we can draw from that we should be utilizing this idea of a day of judgment as a filter system for ourselves. Like there's something attached to our words. We better make a change on how we speak. It's how we speak eventually affects the relationship. It defines the relationship. I've got a couple of questions that we're going to look at. They're going to help us place this filter in our life. So question number 1. What is my motive for posting this? We're saying this. But what is my motive for doing this? What is, if you look back through and just scroll through your posts, what does that say about your heart? If our words are attached to our heart, what is it actually saying about our heart? Are you angry? Are you jealous? Are you upset? What is it saying about where you're at personally? What's the intent here? Do you want to try to make yourself feel better, or are you trying to make somebody else feel worse? Is this a moment where you're just trying to get something off your chest? Here's a favorite. Are you just trying to share your truth? Don't get me started, but I will give you 2 cents. Your truth is just your opinion. It's your perspective, and it's valid and important. But to call your perspective truth is to invalidate what actually is the truth. Because there is a truth, there is not many truths. Okay, rant over. Are you trying to change their mind? Like, is that the motivation behind what you're trying to share, behind what you're trying to post online? You're like, I just want to change their mind. I want them to see it the way that I see it. Has that ever happened in the history of social media where you've hopped on Facebook and you're like, you know what? They see the world completely different. Let me put this post out there. And they're like, what? I didn't know. Mind changed. I don't think it's ever happened. If it does, congratulations. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. Because we're on Facebook, we're on social media to find other people that sound exactly like us, that see the world like us. Because we want to hear ourselves through other people. And then it's like this echo chamber of like, see, everybody else sees it this way. That means you're wrong. Right? That's what we love. To show who's right, who's wrong. So what's the intent? What's the motive for posting this thing? Not to requote Clay Scroggins again, but for the second time this morning. He says this. He says, if it doesn't lift them up, put the phone down. If it doesn't lift them up, put the phone down. Then it's not worth it. It's not advantageous to the relationship. It's not beneficial. Don't do it. Another side note here. If your motivation is just to be funny, that's great. But sometimes funny things are best left unsaid because they can still cause damage in the relationship. You can make yourself laugh all you want, but you can still hurt someone in that laughter. Be careful. Just because it's funny doesn't mean that it's okay. That is not the filter of whether you should say it or post it or not. Next question. Am I emotional about this? Right, this is me angry typing on the keyboard. Am I emotionally, invested in what I'm saying right now? Is it overwhelming something? And it's not that emotions, I don't want you to hear me say emotions are bad or evil or we should do away with all emotions. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is emotions can overwhelm our ability to be functional in the conversation. But too much emotions in the situation, and our functionality drops. It starts to lower, right? You start to lose your mind. We use this all the time. He lost his mind in that conversation, right? We can't think quite straight because we get so invested in our emotions. If you're driving when this is happening, you end up someplace that you weren't even trying to drive to. You're just angry driving and you're like making turns that you didn't realize that you're like, now I'm lost. Now I'm angry and lost. Before you type and send an email or that text or whatever it might be that you're debating, you have it typed out on your phone. Maybe you should show someone next to you and be like, hey, do I sound overly emotional about what I'm saying? Do I sound angry in this? And let them, from a third-party, perspective, tell you yes or no. And then maybe you don't hit send. Maybe that's the best choice that you can make. Maybe you wait for a little while and let the emotions die down so you can see it clearly, right? Here's another question. Would I be willing to say this to their face? That's a big question. Would I be willing to say this exact thing face to face? We already talked about drummers. Probably not. Probably not. They got sticks. They got some anger because probably not. But what is it about screens that make us think that we can say whatever we want? It's different. 98% of the time, you wouldn't say that to their face. So then why are you saying it to the screen that's actually seeing their face? Because eventually it hits its mark. Eventually it hits home. Eventually it's going to make an impact in them. And it's going to change the relationship that you have with them, whatever that might be. There's this, and when I read this, I thought that's so brilliant. Because screens remove social cues. When we're having a conversation, there's feedback. You're constantly evaluating what your words are doing in that person. Either they're smiling, they're laughing. If you have a screen in your face, you can't see the tears that are forming in their eyes. You think you're just fine. You don't see it. Right? This is the same thing that small children have to learn. You can't just say what's ever on your mind, in your brain. Because a lot of those things are mean. A lot of those things, they might be true, but they also might be mean. And we don't say those mean things because they cause hurt and pain in somebody else. And typically the lesson that has to be learned is to see someone else go through pain that we caused before we realize, as a small child, I have to use nice words. I have to use kind words. Not just because mom and dad tell me so, but because I'm having an effect. I'm hurting somebody else by the words that I'm using. This might be most true when we're frustrated with Delta Airlines. And here's the thing. You have a flight canceled and you're like, you know what? They need to hear about this. And so you hop online and you're like, you know what? They do. They have a social media guru. So today they're going to earn that title. And you start to lay into them. Remember who you're talking to. This is a person that was hired for marketing. This is a person that you've never met, that you wouldn't talk like that to their face, that has had nothing to do with a flight being canceled, being adjusted, has nothing to do, they can't change the weather. Like they can't do anything about what you're upset about. So, is it wise? Is it beneficial? And again, it's dangerous. As a Jesus follower, what is being left? What is the trail I'm leaving in my relationships, even people that I don't know? What is the impact that I'm having on other people's lives? One of the greatest things that you can do is, and I use this word intentionally, it's a church word, so if you're not a church person, I apologize, but if you choose to bless someone that you will not ever see again, there's something unique and precious about that. When you try to make someone's day better, and you know that they're never going to be able to repay you, that might be the most Jesus-like that you have all day long. That moment. Where you're representing him even though that person's never going to even know your name to say thank you. That's an incredible moment. Now, if you're sitting here this morning and you're like, you know what? I would say it straight to their face. I would probably spit on them too. If that's where you're at, there's probably a different set of questions, and I'll ask those to you privately another day. That's not for this morning. Well, let's look at rule number 3 one more time. I will treat you with respect, whether I'm with you or not. When it comes to our language, when it comes to how we treat people, whether online, whether face-to-face, our words matter. I'm all for freedom of speech. Absolutely. I think it's amazing that we prioritize that we invest in that we protect that. But freedom of speech does not remove the repercussions of our speech. So you can say what you want, absolutely, but you're going to pay one way or another. So be careful. Right? One of the most mature things that you can actually do is withhold your freedoms, what you can justify in order for somebody else, for their sake. We've talked about Paul a lot during the series. We're going to look at him one more time. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22. There's a letter that he wrote to the church in Corinth. He says, "To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some." He's going to turn down the volume of himself. He doesn't have to justify himself. He's going to turn down the brightness a little bit himself. He's going to ease off the horsepower a little bit in order that he can be heard and felt and seen and experienced by somebody else rather than overpowering him. This word save, it means to deliver, to protect, to make whole again. He's going to do whatever he can to deliver, to protect, to make whole, to save them, whatever he can. Why? Because Paul experienced something, and I hope you experience this as well, that following Jesus makes life better and makes us better at life. And once we experience that, it becomes our life mission. I'm going to do whatever I can for somebody else to experience this because it is so good. It's not easier. It's not easier. It's going to cost you something, absolutely. But life is better. Life is better when we're following Jesus. Would you do what Paul did? Would you turn down your own brightness so that somebody else might actually see the truth that's in there? They wouldn't be blinded by it, but they would actually see accurately what you're representing, which is Jesus. When you do this, when you limit your freedom for somebody else to express God's love to them, all of a sudden you start to see fruit pop up in the relationship, the grace. You start to see that hope, that peace, that forgiveness. When you love them like He's loved you, it affects the relationship to a great degree, even online. It's amazing. So, to just kind of reiterate all of our rules one final time. Rule number 1, I will treat every person as someone Jesus died for because they are and He did. Rule number 2, I will do all I can do to keep peace with all people. And our rule today, I will treat you with respect, whether I'm with you or not. We're all governed by something, right? We all submit to something, whether that is our politics, whether that's to an addiction of some type, whether that is to our money and how we spend our money and the things that we try to accumulate. We submit to something in this world and in this life. When we decide to submit to Jesus and follow Jesus and make Him the top priority, that means that everything else gets bumped out of the way. When He is our first lens, something changed. We start to see the world differently than we had before. When He's our first priority, the world around us starts to change gradually. He is our determinator. I don't even know if that's a word. Our relationships are then defined by our primary relationship with Him. All of our relationships are impacted by that one single relationship with Him. And when we do that, that's when grace starts to show up. That's when peace works its way in there. You're like, whoa, where'd you come from? Peace? It's good to see you. That's when love starts to show up in the relationship. Now, just to conclude this whole series and also our morning, I do have some questions for you because I want this conversation to continue, not just in here, but out there where your relationships are acted out. Why is it easier to write something on a screen than to say it in person? Has this ever gotten you into trouble? Let's pass the mic around and share. No. Next question. Have you ever taken a break from social media? How did you feel after the break? Honesty question. Did you end the break earlier than intended? Points back to how much control it has on you. How can you implement Paul's practice of becoming weak to connect with others? How important is that motivation? Pretty important. Let me pray. We're going to wrap things up this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank You for today. We thank you for a beautiful Mother's Day with beautiful mothers. God, I pray that we would do what we can do to invite you into the middle of every relationship that we have. That we would allow you to guide us, to lead us, to move us in a direction that would drag health into the relationship, that would bring peace back to the relationship. God, I pray that we would leave an imprint of you on all the people that we have interactions with, whether we ever meet them or not, whether all we know is their screen name or real name. I pray that we would represent you well even in that relationship. I pray that we would add that filter to our life, that the words that we speak will be accounted for on a day of judgment. And as much as that is terrifying and scary, I pray that that would lead us in the direction of making better use of our words, that we would choose to use them positively, to draw people to you, to encourage people, to give them hope. And I pray that that would be our priority, because you are our priority. We love you, God. We thank you that you first loved us. In your name I pray. Amen.